Before I start, I don't want to put anyone off. I love CrossFit. I did CrossFit for a long time. I still do CrossFit workouts 2 to 3 times a week. Um, yeah, it's an awesome program. It is slightly limited in what it offers as far as uh, long-term health and expounding on how to fix imbalances that pretty much everybody except, well, even elite athletes have it, but they have fewer than regular Joes like you and me. Um, anyway, CrossFit does a fairly poor job because it's trying to cater to so many people of actually teaching healthy movement, in my opinion. They teach position. They don't really teach tension and how to generate tension in different muscle groups and where you should be feeling these movements. And the human body moves a certain way, and yes, that's true. It does move a certain way, but everybody moves individually to how their body moves, right? Your hips could be structured different. So you could be a close stance squatter versus a wide stance squatter. Your muscles might have different lengths to them because you don't have the mobility through the range of motion. So it's not, you can't just put somebody in a squatting stance and say your feet are going to be this far apart, your toes are going to be turned at this angle, your knees are going to track here, you're going to keep your chest here, knees out, chest up. You always hear that shouted. It's not as effective and actually can become detrimental to people who take it super seriously, as having that person feel what their body is actually doing when they squat, as far as creating tension in the glutes, creating tension in the obliques, in the hamstrings, in the adductors. Are you squeezing all those muscles, getting all those muscles to work correctly? Same thing applies for the shoulders. You press a bar overhead, and the rule is, used to be, it's not anymore, but the rule in competition and for sanctioned things like the Open were get the ear showing, on the front side of the arm when you go overhead with a bar. Well, for some people, that's not even an option. For me, my left arm is an inch shorter than my right arm because I broke it on the growth plate. So the left side moves very differently than the right side moves, and you can tell that. There's a lot of dysfunction on the left side. This is what started this whole journey. Anyway, that's not to tear CrossFit down. It's just to say that it may be incomplete, and that there are a lot of people out there with a lot of things that can add to the knowledge I already have in CrossFit and the knowledge you may already have from whatever fitness background you have, whether that's yoga, whether that's endurance, whether that's, fighting, martial arts, strength, powerlifting, Olympic weightlifting, bodybuilding, whatever it is. All of those fields have something to offer to all of the other fields. And being able to break down those barriers and help to learn from each other, that's very, very important to creating a well-rounded body and a well-rounded person. This goes for everything. I talk about spiritual health. I'm not talking about religion. I'm talking about spirituality. So there's a big, big difference there between religion and spirituality. Religion is a system that's usually set up to, I don't know that I want to delve into that right now. If you guys want to see more videos on that, I can tell you what I think. It's just my opinion. I think you should go out and figure out your own spirituality. You should figure out who you are as a person, as a spiritual person, and figure that out on your own. That's part of self-awareness and becoming a person. Anyway, all that to say, meditation is very, very useful. Long walks outside, taking in nature, very, very useful to helping you recover, to helping you grow as a person, instead of just metconning hard every single day or doing a strength piece because that's what your coach said for you to do. There are a lot more facets to life and fitness than just going to the gym, spending an hour beating yourself down, and then leaving. We'll talk about nutrition. I'm sure we'll talk about nutrition in this. Anyway, all that to say, this journey started with the shoulders for me. I didn't really have back pain. At the time, I didn't have knee pain. There was a lot of stuff that I couldn't do. I wasn't necessarily the strongest at squatting or bench pressing. I could definitely deadlift more than anything else. The clean and jerk in the Olympic lifts, I was okay at that. My form was poor, to say the least. The snatch, again, with the shoulders and the upper back and the midline and all that stuff, that was pretty rough for me. I could power snatch fairly well, but squat snatch was rough, to say the least. So I did split snatch for a while, which, whatever. That was a great learning experience, but not necessarily the thing you want to do. Anyway, but 4 or 5 years ago, I couldn't overhead squat without excruciating pain in the front of my shoulders. My shoulders were hurting, starting out, warming up in the front, probably in the rotator cuff, probably somewhere in rotator cuff, labrum, something in the shoulder. Anyway, I didn't ever get imaging done, like an MRI or anything like that. And I'm pretty sure that I didn't injure myself as far as tearing anything. I'm too much of a baby for that. I backed way off the intensity on that and just moved to other stuff. Changed what I was doing, which in the long run I think was a lot smarter than just pushing through the pain. Anyway, and so I started looking. CrossFit had nothing to offer as far as their resources online for proper shoulder mechanics. They preach an external rotation when you're going overhead, which is, it sounds good, and with a limited amount of knowledge, it makes a lot of sense, but external rotation is just saying get your joints into a certain position, and that will help out, which on the outside sounds good, but has nothing to do with muscular tension. So I had no way to tension certain muscles and not tension other muscles, and as a result, I was lost when I went overhead with a bar, with dumbbells, with anything, and I had no stability because I was overusing my traps instead of using the muscles that actually should be acting on the humerus, on the head of the humerus, which is the pec minor, the inside bicep, the teres major, the lat dorsi. 4 muscles act on the inside of the humerus. And they act in different ways and they move in different ways. But all of those muscles were missing for me. And I didn't know that because I just had no idea. That's not to say that if you're having shoulder pain, this will fix that problem. This is to say maybe it's time to start looking and become curious about what is deficient and what is imbalanced from side to side, and what is imbalanced in the shoulder joint itself for you. The hope is that with these videos, as we continue these videos about fixing the shoulder pain that you're having, that I can give you some kind of value that you can go and start to look for and use. In CrossFit, people who don't move correctly, who don't start out moving correctly, tend to use their traps a lot. Some of that is the exercises and movements that are prescribed. Some of that is the way that people naturally move after sitting at an office with their shoulders all hunched up, with their hand on a mouse and on a keyboard on a desk that's too high for them. I didn't do that. My thing probably was from welding with my head forward, my traps working constantly to hold my head up. And then, of course, I had some history of doing a lot of sumo deadlift high pull instead of rowing on a rowing machine, because the substitute back in the day of CrossFit was 1 sumo deadlift high pull, which I can demonstrate later if you really want to see, for every 10 meters on a rower. So when a 5K row was prescribed, we didn't have a rower, so you got to do 500 reps of sumo deadlift high pull, which there are multiple ways to do the movement. There are multiple ways to, yeah, there are ways to do it with your traps and your biceps, and there are ways to do it with your scaps and your shoulders a little bit more. And just moving the hands around, changing the tension, changing the position of the body a little bit. All that to say, we did a lot of rowing when I first started back in 2008, because the rower was an easy machine for a lot of people to get. And it was very popular, and it was fairly new, and so people were like, oh, great, we're going to do this. I was poor and didn't have a Concept 2 rower, didn't have any kind of rower, a Schwinn rower or whatever. I didn't have any of that, and so it was a 45-pound bar. And I got very, very good at sumo deadlift high pull with a super lightweight, and my traps grew incredibly. The problem with that is that when the trap is overworking up here, it starts to elevate the shoulder up like this and pull it out of a stable position. That's not the point. That's not what should be happening with your shoulder. So when you go overhead, instead of being able to keep your shoulder back and down or have it in a strong position that's supported by the musculature around it, it's up. It's shrugged up. You're up here, right? So you don't have a stable base for the shoulder to go. So you can't hold positions like a handstand. You can't hold, it's very, very difficult to do handstand walking. It's very difficult to press a bar overhead and hold it overhead for a second or a minute or whatever you're thinking to do. It's very difficult to have a stable overhead position unless you crank the midline out of position to get you where you want to go. There tends to be a lot of arching. You tend to use the upper abs to brace instead of actually using the obliques and the TVA and the glutes to brace, which makes pressing over time, it makes your pressing mechanics get farther and farther out of where they naturally should be and what you naturally should be able to do. Anyway, that's a lot all at once, but the point of this is not to scare you or make you upset. The point is to say there is a solution for your shoulder pain. There is a way that you can get out of pain, and that you can get stronger than you ever were, and that you can get healthier than you ever have been. Anyway, that's a little teaser probably for the next video, but that's the point of this series, fixing your shoulder pain. That's what we're going to do.